biggest loser of the debate. I will go first, and I don't think there's really any question. It's Chris Cuomo, and specifically Chris Cuomo's attempts at humor, which were abysmal, but just generally his insiderness. What I was struck by was one of the questions was to Hillary at the end was, who are your friends on the other side? Look at Scalia and Ginsburg. They were friends. Who are your friends on the other? And of course, she couldn't name one because she would be doing no favors to that person, even whether she has one or not. But I think it's interesting that the notion that Ginsburg and Scalia were friends is everyone's so happy about this. Like, it's so nice. They were bitter opponents, and yet they came together to go to the opera or whatever the hell they did together. And what I see is they're both insiders. And
I'm an insider. I'm Chris Cuomo.
And Chris Cuomo's an insider. Yeah. And all the insiders appreciate insiders who are nice to each other because they understand that you should put that partisanship aside when you go out to dinner and on the cocktail party circuit and all that. And Chris Cuomo, he oozed that bullshit insider annoyingness to me, especially with specifically about Bernie when he said, he asked a question about all this talk about the millionaires and the billionaires and wanting to tax them. Aren't you really dividing the country? You missed this because you weren't. But isn't that sort of divisive? And I'm thinking, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump openly talk about deporting 12 million people, going door to door and jerking them out of their house. That's divisive, and yet nobody ever asks them that.
No, but it's literally divisive. You're going to divide the families.
Literally taking families apart.
Right, and when you ban Muslims from coming into the country, again, some of their family might be here. You're dividing them from us. These are things that are literally divisive. And you could also even flip it on the economic issues too. You could say, now wait a minute, when you give yet another tax break to the millionaires, aren't you also dividing us by giving them further advantages and dividing them from the rest of society? And when you argue against increasing the minimum wage, aren't you furthering dividing society when you say, hey, you got to get by on $7.25 an hour, which is unbelievable, right? Instead of $12 or $15, and you're stratifying our society and ripping it apart. You could frame it that way, but they never do, right? Instead, they frame it as they did tonight with Bernie Sanders, as Malcolm pointed out. But to go back to your earlier point about the establishment, I want you to understand what a great point Malcolm made, because I've lived it, right? So when I was an anchor on MSNBC briefly, I got invited to the club, right? Like there's this one place, for example, it's almost literal, where the power set in New York have breakfast. And my agent took me there. I got a great agent, bless his heart, and everybody comes and says, hi, yeah, this, that, and the other thing. And Sharpton is there, and Tom Coburn is there, and John Bolton is there, and Harold Ford Jr. Like all these guys that you would consider establishment, Republican and Democrat, they're all there having a wonderful time.
And
right?
who also might go on TV and appear to be at each other's throats and arguing about topics on Meet the Press or whatever. They would seem to be bitter, bitter rivals. Yes,
and if I've been in 1,000 green rooms, and in green rooms, everybody's so pleasant, right? And then they get out there and fight, pretend to fight, etc. So now, here's the two problems with that. In the establishment, it is considered a bigger crime to be rude to someone else inside the club than it is to kill 100,000 Iraqi civilians. And think about that, absorb it, because they really don't get it, and they don't pass that on to their audience. They never ask those tough questions, right? In their heads of like, wait, what's the bigger crime? Henry Kissinger carpet bombing Vietnam as well as several other countries in the area, or being impolite to Henry Kissinger. I swear to you, and you will see it over and over again, the establishment thinks it is a far, far worse crime to be impolite to the Henry Kissinger or Donald Rumsfeld than what Kissinger or Rumsfeld actually did. So that's why when Bernie Sanders in an earlier debate took on Henry Kissinger, that was breaking a lot of the rules of the establishment. That's part of why they can't stand him. That's why he gets the tougher questions from Chris Cuomo, who by the very nature of his job and his existence and his family and everything about Cuomo is bathed in the establishment to the point that he's a fish. And you ask him, hey, how's the water feel? And he's like, what water?
No, he felt some. Is it me, or does he look also a lot like Aaron Burnett? Like there's like the big blue eyes.
Vacant look.
It's like he's Aaron Burnett's little sister. And he was just told tonight, listen, Chris, there might not be a Santa Claus. Like he had the big sad eyes look. But also you understand, they're not going to get upset with each other and they're not going to be rude to each other because if you're in that world, it doesn't affect your life anyway. You're going home to a nice house. You've got enough to eat. You don't have to worry, are my kids going to go to school next year or not? This is all solved for you. So it's like you're arguing about theoreticals for the most part.
Yeah, it's the political game that we're playing, and he's acting as though I'm going to give you this question, and what's your game? What's the answer you're going to give as part of this game? And there's no recognition, like when you raise the minimum wage for millions of workers, it has a material effect on their lives.
So that's why I always remember when Andrew Breitbart passed away, right? So I had him on the Young Turks, and I asked him about a lot of things, and he gave an answer that was obviously like, hey, Cenk, we're playing around here. Yeah, I accused the Occupy people of being rapists, but obviously they're not rapists. That was theater, right? That was the essence of his answer. You can go back and watch that interview, right? And then when he died, he was really celebrated as a person who played the game well, right? Oh, he was a provocateur, but he was, oh man, he knew how to needle the liberals and he knew how to lie about them. They wouldn't say lie, of course, yada, yada. But the problem is, again, Malcolm is right. It's not a game. Like, okay, you play pickup basketball, that's a game, right? You play chess, you play whatever. You play games at home with your wife. Personally, it might not be a game, but it's, that's your druthers. But when you play it in politics, it has enormous consequences. So when the Breitbarts of the world back in the day, the Coulters, the Trumps, now all these people, they play the game well, the minimum wage does not get increased. You get so much less money and you can barely eat, right? And you see your kid and you see him going hungry, you can't do anything about it. And the guys in Washington, New York, they're playing the game. It was almost like the Hunger Games, right? Like, shall we drop something to the, what did they call them? Whatever thing, right?
Throw them some tax credits to that enterprise zone down there.
Yeah, and so they're having a fun little patty cakes. Meanwhile, it's devastating the rest of us, right? And so that's the problem with the Chris Cuomos of the world. He has no idea, like, hey, dude, it's not just a game. There's super important consequences here.